Republicans and conservative Democrats are concerned about the cost and complexity of the overhaul. Congressman Peter Roskam joins us from Washington to talk about the Republican response to what President Obama had to say. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, delighted to be here. Thank you.
So what's your initial reaction? Enough details from the president? Do you think it'll get passed before the August break?
There's a real stall pattern out here right now, and I think what you've seen is the president trying to turn the high beams on and persuade even members of his own party, particularly the blue dog Democrats, who tend to be pretty tight with a buck, and they want to make sure that they're not blowing the budget away. And I'll tell you, last week in the Ways and Means Committee on which I serve, the director of the Congressional Budget Office came in and he essentially said two things, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you're rushing this, you haven't given us enough time to evaluate this bill, it's 1,000 pages and very detailed. But number two, there's nothing that indicates that this is going to save any money. In fact, this is going to cost a fortune. And I think that as people look closely at this bill and are having the opportunity to go into a little bit more detail, they're becoming very reluctant on the idea of giving the government more and more control, and they're just not believing that it's going to save money in the long run.
On the Democratic side, though, the sense is that, you know, America's been working toward this for 61 years. They say that's not rushing.
Well, look, when you drop a piece of legislation on the desk of Congress and ask one committee to vote on it within 5 hours, that's rushing the bill. And here's my point. If this bill is as great as the president says, if this bill is as great as Nancy Pelosi says, then let's let the American public take a look at it over the August congressional recess. If it's good today, it's going to be good in about 5 weeks. We can let folks look at it, get comments back, and then ultimately make a good decision right after Labor Day.
Yeah, the sense we're getting is that's exactly what's going to happen, that this deadline that the president's imposed simply is not realistic and is not going to be realized.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Even the president's closest ally in the United States Senate, Senator Durbin, said just today that, or he's quoted today as saying that the August deadline that the president imposed is not realistic.
What changes could be made to this plan as it exists that Republicans would go for? Is there a change that could be made to this that would make it good?
I think what I'm hearing from my district is they want to have a good conversation and they want to see health care reform. There's nobody that is interested in defending the status quo because the costs are skyrocketing. We don't have a program that's accessible to every American, and we can clearly do much better. But I think the real linchpin of reluctance is this so-called public option insurance plan. We had a number of amendments that were offered in the Ways and Means Committee that would have said this plan cannot ration health care, and that was rejected.
Yeah,
we also had amendments that said...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. We also had amendments that said we're going to protect Americans that make $250,000 or less from any increase in payroll taxes or any new tax liability, and that was rejected. And I think there's a number of folks that are reading independent studies that have suggested if you pass this plan, according to one study, the Lewin Group, which has a good reputation in Washington, 114 million Americans will move from private health coverage that they have today into this public option. And ultimately, that's really a prelude to a single-payer system.
Right. And Peter, it sounds like you're on board for change. It sounds like there's a lot of support for change to the system. It's the pacing. And how much of this is the timing, given the economic malaise the country's facing, adding to the tax burden of any segment of the American public?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the reluctance to put an increased burden on American job creators, right? I mean, we've lost 2 million jobs since the stimulus package passed. The unemployment rate in Illinois has now eclipsed 10%. The administration told us that nationally we weren't going to be past 8% if the stimulus package passed, and that is all really underperformed. And there isn't an interest right now in putting more of a burden on Americans that are really struggling under an economy that seems to be slipping away.
Real quickly, President Obama says Republicans are playing politics, and they're accusing him, or they're saying that this could be his Waterloo. Is it about politics, or do you blame the president for bringing that up kind of in his speech last night?
No, I think that I've heard both arguments from the president. The president last night says, you don't see me blaming Republicans, and yet he's making those very comments that you mentioned. But let's put that aside. I think what you're really noticing for the first time are Democrats who are in the president's own party who have become very reluctant on the direction that this administration is taking the country. And for the first time, they're beginning to assert themselves in ways that I don't think Speaker Pelosi was counting on.
Congressman Peter Roskam, always great to see you. We've got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us live from Washington this morning.
Thank you.